Good morning. Thanks for checking out Power on the Block. Of course, Power on the Block is in your neighborhood. We're about your community and we're on your radio. Don't forget, we do this every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. and we like to talk to people who are very active in the community. I have a wonderful array of guests, and this week I am so happy to welcome Pamela Thomas and Lorene Williamson. They're curators at the Museum of UnCut Funk, which is basically like a virtual website, and it is very funky. And we have lots to talk about this morning, including Black Music Month. It's this coming month. So welcome, Pamela and Lorene.
Hi. Thank you.
Good morning. And you know what? Thank you. I have to say so much for waking up early with me on Memorial Day weekend.
Hey, no problem. Not a problem at all.
What do you two have going on for your holiday weekend? First off, let's just start there.
Well, we're doing a little barbecuing. We're doing some filming. We're getting ready to create a new blog called Cafe 70, which will be highlighting some of my favorite recipes and doing a live cooking show.
Oh, I love it. As I mentioned when we started this interview, you know, we have such interesting, wonderful guests who have so much going on with their initiatives. And I thought that you would be a perfect guest for our show because I really am enjoying what the two of you are doing with this Museum of UnCut Funk. I would love to see you in an actual space here in New York City or the tri-state area. But right now you have this, basically it's like this virtual website with all of these fantastic artifacts that I think that people should know about. So first of all, just tell me a little more about your mission at Museum of UnCut Funk.
Well, the collection at the museum is really our personal collection, which includes 1970s blaxploitation movie posters. We have about 800 in our collection, both American and international. The original animated cells and drawings from all of the black cartoons from the 1970s. Comic books that feature black superheroes and villains from the 1970s. Signage, for instance, your advertising tins, which goes a little further back, and a whole slew of other things that we wanted to just collect. You know, we're big fans of museums, but we kind of feel like there is the same old thing that you always go to see when you go to different museums, and we wanted to put a twist on our museum and actually exhibit this type of collection because you really don't see it anywhere.
Yeah, and you know, this is cool because we always like to talk about things that people can get involved in or that they can do in the local area on this show. And this in particular, because as you mentioned, Pamela, it is virtual. I urge anyone listening to check out museumofuncutfunk.com. You will be so impressed. They're of course on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And you know, Pamela and Lorene, while I have you on the line, I wanted to get more information about your Jackson 5 cartoon series exhibit. I know Black Music Month is coming up in a couple more days. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, as you know, the Jackson 5 was the first black cartoon that featured a musical group in the 1970s. And it's almost kind of forgotten about, but due to the loss of Michael Jackson, you know, people are starting to talk about what they remembered about the cartoon. And so we actually have in our collection a number of original animated cells and drawings that we use under the camera for the filming of the cartoon. And what we're getting ready to do is put together an online exhibition in addition to an actual exhibition that will be touring in 2013 as it relates to the Jackson 5 and their contributions to music and what they, the type of music that they produced or rather sang in the cartoon.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, we're huge fans of the Jackson 5. Obviously, we both grew up watching them and loving their music. It's important to note that they were the first real positive depiction of a musical group because a lot of black musicians were depicted prior to the 70s in very stereotypical and kind of racially oriented cartoons. But when you got to the 1970s, you started to see more positive depictions of black athletes, black people, black musicians, the Jackson 5 really kind of kicking that off. So it's important to, you know, in their 40th year, the cartoon is 40 years old, so it's their anniversary, particularly with the loss of Michael, to make sure that we kind of remember how important this cartoon was, not only for a lot of black children, but, you know, back then you didn't have cable, so every kid watched this cartoon. So it was really an important kind of groundbreaking effort, Motown's first TV series, and it was important for everybody who watched TV back then.
Yeah, you know, that's interesting because we talk a lot about African-American depictions in the media on this show, and I think it's so important to kind of highlight those positive portrayals in our society. I just think that it's really relevant.
Well, yeah, we're probably a little bit older than you are, but the first generation, of which our first African American president is a part of, they grew up watching positive animated depictions of themselves on television. Very different than generations that had come before, and the Jackson 5 being a critical component of that, along with Fat Albert, the Harlem Globetrotters. You had your black character on Josie and the Pussycats. So you saw not only cartoons that were all black cast, but you also saw black characters interacting in a multiracial, kind of setting in cartoons for the first time during the 1970s.
And just to add to that, although it was a black cartoon, it wasn't for a black audience. Everyone watched these cartoons in the 1970s, and they made an impact on children's lives across the board as it relates to race.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're just tuning in, we're joined by Pamela Thomas and Lorene Williamson. They're head curators at the Museum of UnCut Funk. And by the way, you can check them out at museumofuncutfunk.com, and you will be so impressed with what you see there, which is, of course, why I wanted to have them on this show. And don't forget, they're on Facebook, Twitter, at Sista2Funky is their Twitter handle. That's SISTATOFUNKY, and we're talking about a lot of the exhibits and virtual exhibits that they have there at museumofuncutfunk.com. And I have to ask you, because I know that anybody who checks out this website is going to wonder the same thing, but how did you two get your hands on some of the things that we're seeing there? Because honestly, there's so much there that I have never seen before, and I honestly don't know if I'll ever see again. So I'm just kind of curious.
Well, we've been collecting for 15 years.
Wow, okay.
13 to 15 years.
Okay. Is it like an eBay thing, or do you travel?
It's an eBay thing, but you have to be really careful with eBay because we've been taken a couple of times. It's a matter of building relationships, knowing who is selling what, going and meeting with them, and negotiating the best price you can get, going to poster shows, comic book conventions, stepping out of the realm of what we would normally do, but because we are collectors and we, are collecting to preserve a very important piece of history as far as we're concerned. And again, people are collecting all kinds of things, but there's very few people who are collecting this kind of stuff.
Right. I agree with that. Well, speaking of what you're collecting, tell us a little bit more about your Black animation exhibition.
Well, we just got finished ending a tour exhibition at Museum in Pittsburgh, and it was a very successful run. We had a 40-piece exhibition that really had just about every cartoon from the 1970s, Fat Albert, the Jackson 5, Harlem Globetrotters, Muhammad Ali, I'm the Greatest, and so on. And it was such a success that they ran it for an additional 2 weeks.
Oh, wonderful.
And, it was our first museum exhibit, and we feel we have a great opportunity to now go to other museums and have them have this exhibition in the museum because, quite honestly, with the research that we have done, we're probably the two only people that have a complete Black animation collection of original cells and original drawings.
Wow.
Now, I know for some that may be, okay, so what's the big deal about that? But if you
It's a huge deal.
Well, it is a huge deal to us, but if you put it in comparison to, Walt Disney and Warner Brothers and that type of animation, there is no collection out there that exists like this.
That we've seen anyway, and I think, again,
exactly.
it's animation from the 1970s, and I think that, other than the fact that it's just cool stuff, and, it obviously, brings back warm memories and fond memories for us, the historical importance behind it really is that it, again, is the first time that you're kind of coming out of, animated depictions of Black, people as, cannibals and mammies and very negative portrayals.
Yeah.
So negative, as a matter of fact, that the cartoons that were run, there's 11 of them that are the censored 11. They can't even edit them to make them acceptable to run on television. That's how stereotypical and racial they were. So,
well, is that a lot of the stuff that we saw in Bamboozled? I remember watching Bamboozled and being so angry.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's important. It's always important to see that so that you kind of understand where you've been.
Sure.
So clearly you don't want to go back there, but, you contrast that against, again, Fat Albert, some of these other cartoons, it helps you understand, just again, for a generation of children who are seeing for the first time not only animated depictions that really do kind of look and talk like them, but positive depictions, across the range of things. The first time you're seeing black animated superheroes on TV. Verb from Schoolhouse Rock is the first animated black superhero. So, I mean, there were so many different depictions in a broad range that I think people kind of forget.
Yeah, and I remember Schoolhouse Rock. I don't care if I'm showing my age, but
right.
Well, that's good stuff. Well, anyone just joining us, first of all, thank you for joining us. Memorial Weekend so early, but you're checking out a good show, and I'm glad that you could check this out and learn more about the Museum of Uncut Funk. So check them out, Museum of UnCut Funk.com. We're, of course, talking to head curators Pamela Thomas and Lorene Williamson. And ladies, before I let you go, I have to ask, how can people, outside of going to your website, checking you out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, how can people learn more and or possibly support your efforts?
Well, honestly, I think the best way is really to kind of check us out at the website or some of those other, venues that you kind of talked about. One of the things that, people should kind of be ready for is the tour of our animated collection, which, we'll get on tour in 2013. And, we've got a whole bunch of other stuff that we're working on. So we're, going to continue to build out the collection, but we're also going to start, hopefully doing some various types of events. And, we're getting into filming some different things. So we'll always try to keep something new and fresh. We're about celebrating the past, but trying to keep it fresh and always making the connection on how the 1970s are the foundation for kind of hip-hop and what has followed. So we're going to try to keep it fresh and keep it
funky.
Keep it funky,
Absolutely.
Of course.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, both of you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. And don't forget, check them out, museumofuncutfunk.com. They're on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. And actually, I didn't know the Museum of Uncut Funk was on YouTube, so I'm looking forward to checking that out this afternoon. I hope you do the same. This is Kim Kane. Thanks for joining me for Power on the Block. You know the deal. I'll be back with you from 12 to 4. We're in the mix this Memorial Day weekend. Peace, y'all.